Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about why sometimes PvP in games like Dungeons & Dragons may not be a good idea. A story about a player that thinks all priest-like characters are into kids and goes on a rampage, and much more. But before we get into those, here's a video of Alice to boost our wholesome levels before we bring them right back down again. There we go. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror stories. PvP results in soured feelings by Reddit user Rastrick. First time posting a horror story, but I frequently read stories on this sub and wanted to get opinion on who's the a-hole in this situation. Maybe it's all of us. The horror is fairly mild, but may have resulted in the loss of a longtime member of our gaming group. Here goes. We've just recently started a new campaign, with one of our players switching roles to Dungeon Master. The gimmick of the opening of this game has been a tournament, where the players, and a handful of NPCs, have been competing against each other in a number of events. Most have been odd little mini-games, and there's been a bit of PvP-like encounters thrown in. We'd been in this tournament for several sessions at this point. Even in the battles, there's been no actual danger to our characters, just a friendly competition. No stakes besides the prizes that we might win, which will probably be shared once we become a party and go out adventuring with each other. We've just been building camaraderie and getting a few levels under our belts before we go out into the wider world. The final event of this grand tournament is a battle royale. Every competitor is plunked down in an arena with a structure in the middle. There's locked chests containing useful items, and hidden keys to these chests. The items aren't necessary to win, but you get to keep them, and the last one standing wins. Each competitor starts in a little niche far enough away from the others, so they should be protected from being attacked before they get a turn to go. Should be, unless, that is, a monk with 40 feet movement dashes over to corner another player in their niche, which is what our monk player does to our rogue player. The rest of the table is flabbergasted. We're all making beelines for other objectives, or engaging with the NPCs. We question why this is happening. There was no previous animosity between the characters or the players. The monk's justification? He's a rogue. I can get thieves' tools from him to open the chests. It had just been previously established that per the rules of this particular engagement, you could not loot people. He's reminded of this and asked if he wants to change what he's doing, but nope, he's still going to corner the rogue. So they wail on each other in a long drawn-out fight. The rogue is getting visibly very frustrated and unhappy. He's not having fun, and the entire table knows it. He eventually makes his frustrations even clearer by saying things like, "Why is this happening to me?" and "PvP is always a bad idea," though the beatings did not cease. The rest of us start keeping a very close eye on what the monk player is doing on his turns. We ask him questions about his abilities and how he's accomplishing what he's doing, and find some things that are off, which are then corrected. It's unclear whether he was honestly misunderstanding some abilities, or whether he was purposefully cheating. The rogue goes down, and the rest of the battle is wrapped up. The tournament is over, we get some parting gifts, and head off to accomplish the main plot. The mood at the table improves a bit as we start adventuring, and the session ends. The next morning, the rogue makes his feelings known in our group chat. I won't post it word for word unless it's necessary, but it boils down to, "I did not have fun last night. I hate PvP, and if this game is going to be us ruining each other's fun for the lulz, I'm out." He's met with assurances from the others that we value his feelings, and the rest of the game will definitely be less competitive now that the tourney is over. But there was no response from the monk. He then leaves the message on red. A week passes, and our next scheduled game comes up, but the monk does not show up. He hasn't messaged anyone privately or in the group chat. He hasn't read any more of the messages since the rogues. The Dungeon Master feels terrible because he's not a very experienced Dungeon Master, and he thought a little bit of PvP would be fun and not a problem. Now, the rogue feels guilty that he's driven the monk out of the group. The rest of us feel awful because this person is our friend. While he can be abrasive at the table sometimes, our complaints about him don't go beyond the grumblings you might have over the behavior of a friend you've known for years. And the last time he was a handful at the table, he was going through some personal stuff. So I guess it is a horror story, in that everyone feels horrible. I don't think OP or any of the other players should feel bad. Rogue was just communicating, and everyone took it in earnest, except for the monk. I don't understand why Monk would continue to beat down Rogue, especially after it was explained that he couldn't loot him. I would say to reach out to Monk and see what's going on, and if he wants to continue with the game, but if not, it's not anyone's fault but his. All's Rogue did was communicate. Let's move on. Bullying at My Table by Reddit user Icy Collection 2020. So, for some context, this group has been playing together for a little over a year now, and we are currently running our 4th campaign, my 3rd as a Dungeon Master. We have 5 members in total, with me included, some of which have known each other for years, and others who have struck new friendships through this group. We have one player, I'll call him Mike for anonymity, who has been kind of the unspoken leader amongst the player characters in every campaign. He was a beginner when we started, and started out with decent behavior. Lately, however, there's been a change. If another player character makes any decision Mike doesn't agree with, he decides that he doesn't like that character, and will actively say so during sessions. He acted this way towards my character last campaign when I took a break from dungeon mastering due to burnout. I was able to shrug it off and just play my character the way I wanted to anyway, which helped get us on the right track for plot hooks that he was just ignoring. I am currently running Curse of Strahd for the group, and we're about 4 months in, with weekly sessions. This time, his wrath has turned to my girlfriend's character, but is much more intense than with mine before. His character actively told Strahd, in front of the rest of the party, that he hates my girlfriend's character and would kill him if he could. Any decision my girlfriend makes with her character, no matter what it is, gets treated as stupid and useless. One of the other players, Mike's friend, has also joined in with this treatment of her character. My girlfriend is beyond frustrated. I have tried to mediate this in the past, but we've reached the breaking point. My girlfriend told me after last night's session that she doesn't want to play with this group anymore and won't be going back. She also doesn't want to hang out with Mike anymore outside of sessions, as we usually see him and his wife once or twice a week. I agree with her that his behavior lately has crossed the line, and I support her decision not to play with the group anymore. I'm also considering leaving the group behind, with plans to start another with other friends who have expressed an interest in playing. But how do I handle this situation with the current group? Do I have a group discussion about the behavior happening at the table? Or do I talk to Mike alone and call him out directly for his crap behavior? TLDR. Problem player is treating any player who doesn't follow him like a disciple as stupid and useless, and the targeted player is leaving the group. I plan to disband the group entirely, but how do I end things with my other players? Wow, with the way it sounds like this player has been acting like this before, I'm surprised that the issue was never brought up to him prior. It seems like he may be a bit of a spotlight hog, and would get angry with any player that didn't go along with his plans. Though I would say to not jump on the wagon away from this group just yet. But I would also talk to him privately about his behavior, as with doing it in a group setting, it would probably already be known which player you're talking about, and that could make him feel targeted or singled out. Always try talking things out before jumping ship with a group or with friends to see if things can be salvaged. But if nothing changes after that, then I would say my goodbyes. Though, that is just my thoughts on this one. What would you all suggest? Let's move on. D&D player accuses everyone of being a pedo in order to justify random acts of murder. By Reddit user Dromond the Dragon. I am my friend group's forever dungeon master. About 6 months ago, a friend moved back to town after graduating college, which meant that the friend group were all in the same place since, well, high school, which was pre-pandemic. We never really got into online D&D, so with everyone back in town, we decided to have another campaign. The returning friend rolled up a human rogue. The other relevant player would roll up a kobold cleric, and I, being a bit tired of dungeon mastering, ended up playing as a half-elf sorcerer. When the party met in the classic town tavern intro scene to meet a knight's captain to get their first intro quest to get them to at least level 2, right off the bat, the human rogue sees the kobold cleric and says, "I didn't know that this job involved a damn priest." Kobold explains that he's not a priest in the traditional sense, but an adventurer who met a god who grants him powers. Rogue decided to let this go for now, but made it clear that he was watching him and his phony baloney gods. So the party finished their intro quest and decided to head to the coastal city-states to find out why monster activity is increasing and get paid handsomely to kill them. When they got to the nearest coastal city, they were granted by the city's grand priest, who is leading the city after the royal family was killed by a lich. Rogue ignored everything that was just explained and said, "Why the F did they allow an effing priest to run the city?" The party and the priest tried to calm him down, and he said, "If you cross me, holy man, I'll send you to meet the gods you love so much." When the priest then took us to his temple to unveil a secret dungeon where a magic sword that once belonged to the lich lied, Rogue said, "I bet you there's a trove of kids down in that dungeon. We are dealing with a priest after all." The priest took offense at the allegation and told them that he isn't hiding anything in the dungeon. He can go investigate himself if he wants to. Rogue then said, "Why, so you can kill us and keep your filthy secrets, you pedo?" We were all like, WTF, and before we could respond, he said, "I used sneak attack to kill that filthy pedo priest." We all begged him to stand down, but it was too late. We now were locked in battle with the Grand Priest and his Knight's Order, which were homebrewed paladins. Keep in mind, we were still at level 2. The first 2 rounds made it abundantly clear that we were going to lose, so we ended up fleeing the encounter, and one party member died in the process. Cleric then lays into him, and the rest of the party agree, freaking out that we are now fugitives, and will likely have to watch our backs. Rogue then lambasts us for siding with the cleric, and accuses him of being one and the same with the Grand Priest. He then backs down when he realizes that the rest of the party stands with the cleric, but he does say, "You had better watch yourself, holy man." We end up meeting our dead party member's new character, a ranger, and fleeing into a forest and getting surrounded by a group of orcs. They took us to their shaman, a half-orc and a really interesting character who we are able to reason with. It turns out he has been working to discover the secret of the Lich as well, so he invites us to a feast so that we can make alternative plans. Then, at the feast, as we get seated, Rogue demands to roll perception. He says that, "This feels suspicious. He's probably setting us up to get killed Red Wedding style." When he rolls a nat 1, the Dungeon Master says, "You don't notice anything." Despite this, once the shaman shows up, Rogue says, "I jump up on the table and throw a surprise dagger in that effing orc shaman's neck." The party says, "Can we try to stop him?" But unfortunately, it's a sneak attack, so we can do nothing as he murders our only ally, except beg him not to out of game and ask him why. We remind him that he failed his perception check, so even if he was sus, and he wasn't, his character would have no ability to know. But he just responds, "He's an orc, and orcs are by definition savages who will rape, pillage, and murder anyone they can, especially given the fact that he's a shaman, which is basically a priest for uncivilized savages. And we all know what priests do to kids. My character would never stand for that." We all groan and roll our eyes, and he says, "I attack and show no mercy. All the savages must die." He unfortunately rolls a crit, which kills the orc shaman, who was a level 1. The party in-game freaked out and attempted to tackle him, but it was no use. The orc tribe wouldn't back down, so we had to flee, take a crapload of opportunity attacks, and get 3 other players killed. Now, it was just me, cleric, and rogue. Once we escaped, we told him that he had gone too far, and that he needed to face consequences for his actions. Cleric told him that he must repent of his grave immoral behavior, and Rogue just couldn't help himself and said, "Silence, kid effer," and attacked him. I immediately joined in to help Cleric, as the other 3 players rolled up their characters. They jumped into the fight against Rogue as they finished their character sheets, to which Rogue accused them of metagaming, but they just laughed and basically said in the most ironic way possible, "It's what our characters would do. We are bounty hunters, and you are a wanted man, my murderous friend." But Rogue, somehow, ended up escaping, and the Dungeon Master unironically said, "Oh, I've always wanted to run a split party." Yikes. And that's where we are right now. I have no idea how Dungeon Master is going to run a split party with one renegade party member on his own, murdering religious figures. But on the bright side, at least he's not with us anymore, and we can now, hopefully, actually progress through the story without him being with us or rolling up another edgelord. TLDR. Player accuses random people of being pedos and kills them. He has killed a Grand Priest, an Orc Shaman, and nearly killed the party's cleric. Now he is a fugitive. Wow, that player really has something against any sort of religious leaders. I would say that either something in the character's backstory could be causing this, or the player himself has had a bad experience with one in his past, and was using the game as a way to lash out, as it's no secret that things like that do happen in the real world. Whichever it may be, I would say that all the players should talk about the game above table, and bring these issues and what everyone wants in a game in order to salvage things, even though the Dungeon Master said that he's always wanted to run a split party. What do you all think on this one? Be sure to let me know in the comments. I'm curious. But let's move on. Game Master hypes up a cool and innovative combat system and punishes anyone who actually uses it. Submitted to the D&D Doge subreddit by Reddit user VillainousVillain88. I'll try and keep this short. A player I knew constantly complained about the combat in games like Dark Heresy or D&D because, quote, "all you really do is take turns hitting one another until one dies." And he wanted to GM the unofficial Elder Scrolls tabletop RPG for us because the combat was more dynamic. To be fair, it really was, because as part of your attack, you can choose to do various combat maneuvers. These include trying to trip your opponent, throw sand into their eyes, or feinting the opponent to make them easier to hit on your next turn. It's actually a pretty cool and fun system that I wish more games incorporated. However, there was just one teeny tiny problem. The Game Master absolutely hated when we actually used any of the maneuvers. He viewed them as unfair or annoying, and would punish anyone who used any of them except for the standard attack. You know, the same one he viewed as being boring in 5th edition, by having the enemies in the following encounter constantly do the same action they used in the previous battle on them, to, quote, "teach them a lesson." He was very upfront about what he was doing as well, while looking very smug. I once asked the GM why he had pushed so hard for running the system if he didn't actually want to let us use the main draw of the system, but I never got any answer. All in all, this was one of the reasons the campaign didn't last very long. None of us really ended up having any fun, and it just led to a lot of bad feelings all around. I have yet to participate in another campaign run by this GM, and I honestly think I never will. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Bring in a new combat system, then punish the players for using said combat system. I don't blame OP for not wanting to play with this dude as a Game Master again. Let's move on. No talking during combat, or the most infuriating house rule I have ever encountered. submitted to the DnD Doge subreddit by Reddit user VillainousVillain88. I'll try to keep this short. Basically, our game master decided, on his own and without consulting us, the players, that it was unfair and unrealistic that we players could communicate and strategize out of character during combat. So he implemented a house rule that said that all talking out of character during combat was strictly forbidden. You wanted to say something to someone else? Spend an action and make a check to see if you could actually make yourself understood over the din of battle. Then everyone else, including the enemy, had to make a check to see if they could actually understand you. Naturally, this meant that the enemy instantly knew what we were planning and could immediately counter it. Oh, and if you slipped up at any point and talked out of character, you lost your turn. No excuses. It was infuriating, and no one but the Game Master actually seemed to like it. Then again, every enemy he threw at us had some BS excuse as to why they were not affected. Oh, these are trained soldiers. They know what to do and are used to communicating in battle. Oh, these enemies are linked mentally and can communicate telepathically. Oh, these enemies have already made a plan and know exactly what to do, etc. To our credit, we actually tried to play by his rules and sought ways to acquire the necessary training or spells, or what have you, to allow us to communicate without having to take an action or make checks. But, of course, the Game Master shut each attempt down real quick with even more BS excuses. We eventually had enough, confronted the Game Master, and asked to have the rule removed because it just wasn't fun. He refused to budge because it was vital to the immersion, so we all left the game, and none of us play with that Game Master anymore. Well, I do have to say that the player strategizing out of character what moves they can make is a bit metagamey, but as long as it isn't an all-the-time thing, I don't see anything wrong with it. Like reminding a player that they have a certain item or spell that may help or something. Though that is just my personal preference. But there is always using communicating as a free action, and you can have fun with that by making code words or phrases that the characters can use to ensure that the enemies don't overhear their plans. Not to mention spells that allow for telepathic communication for the characters. Now, it does sound like the players did try to play ball, but the Dungeon Master would just come up with excuses as to why they tried and it didn't work. And to skip a player's entire turn if they accidentally speak out of game about strategy is super harsh. In the end, the players did the right thing and told the Dungeon Master that it was making the game not fun for them, but he wouldn't budge to it breaking immersion. Though, by the sounds of things, now there is no more immersion because there is no more game. Hopefully, the players can find a Dungeon Master that is a tad more lenient. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.